was in Dallas and gave a wonderful speech. He mentioned the military power of China is behind the United States about 20 years. Can you comment on that?
So you go first.
Okay, I think the first, I didn't quite hear, but the guy who's studying Taiwan, did you have a question? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I'm drinking enough coffee now. I thought there was a question. Okay. Then the observation and speech about foreigners studying China, I think. Hello? Oh, I don't know anything about the chip industry. I don't follow that. I'm sorry. But the thing about ignorant foreigners, sure, I'm an ignorant foreigner. I admit it. I'm a foreign policy analyst. Most of my work in the past has been on security issues, and I'm not a comparative politics person who studied agricultural production in Jiangsu province or anything like that. I think that's speaker has left. He was a historian on China, but I have lived in China. You mentioned about the behavior of the Chinese people in the mainland versus Taiwan, and I'm a little more optimistic, I think, than you are. I lived there in 1989 and 90 for a year. I've lived in Beijing for 6 months later on, and several months in Shanghai and what have you. I think it has improved quite a bit since 1989-90. It was really a pretty rough year for us. It was not the China that you have today, and I'm quite optimistic about the young people from the mainland as compared to what I saw at that time. But I do think that, I agree that a lot of people don't know much about what they're talking about. And I'm very happy to see a fellow Tejano, Texan, in the audience. Yeah, you graduated from the University of Texas. And oddly, you talk about education and exchanges. That's where I became interested in Taiwan. As a graduate student at UT Austin, my classmates, quite a few of them were from Taiwan. And one of my professors, I had nothing to write about for a class. I was supposed to do a project. And he said, his professor said, "You're hanging with these guys from Taiwan. Why don't you write about Taiwan?" And my whole life changed. That's what I did. But that was also, I mean, I shouldn't dwell on that, but it was very interesting that, you know, they were studying factions in politics, and I asked this guy, friend of mine, we'd go drink Pijo and, you know, and what have you, and I said, "Are there factions in the Kuomintang?" "No." So the next thing, I'm working on this project, and a week later, "Are there factions in the Kuomintang?" Because it was still under martial law. "No." And then the third time I asked, I said, "Are there factions within Kuomintang?" "There are 3 factions." And I jotted this down and put it as a footnote, primary source material, you know, got an A on the paper. This is interesting. So I moved on from there. But your question about a state versus a nation is sort of a, you know, this is an issue in English versus Chinese. You know, different languages have different meanings for the same, you know. A state is a man-made entity that, you know, exercises power within a certain jurisdiction and has diplomatic relations with other countries. And a nation, on the other hand, is a group of people held together by a common history, oftentimes language, even though in places like China, you know, there's many, many languages, but held together with a common language and culture and what have you. So there can be many states within nations or nations within states. So they are different. So if I say that I believe there's one Chinese nation, that doesn't, I could say, well, there is a PRC and an ROC, much like I could say there's one Korean nation. There's a DPRK and an ROK, but it's still Korea. It's still a Korean nation, but there's 2 states in that one nation. So you could make that argument. Now, there are people in the Taiwan independence movement who say, no, Taiwan is so different than the mainland and they're two different nations. But then if you start digging into that, and I don't want to stir up any of that kind of stuff, but you could say, well, we could say that about Fujian, and we could say that about Gansu, and we could say that about other parts of the mainland as well that are quite different from each other. But it gets real complicated because then in Chinese, which I am not an expert in Chinese language, my Chinese is pretty lousy. If you put my Spanish and my Chinese together, I've got one language, okay, foreign language. But in Chinese, there's much less of a distinction. And that's where President Lee with the two states, they said it here, it looked quite reasonable, but when they said it in Chinese in East Asia, it sounded more like two nations, which really stirred things up. And here people said, well, yeah, it is two states. But, so it's an interesting question.
You don't need record, right? Can I just answer? With all this is also quite disturbing to some extent. Now, first I would like to answer, reply to first I would like to reply the inquiry when asked by the attorney from the beautiful San Francisco, I presume. Well, the commercial practice about the IC design, all these things is very different. Nowadays, if compared with the hardware manufacturing, actually they can go through internet. Now, ladies and gentlemen, under the mega trend of globalization, there's a 5 circulation: personnel, merchandise, service, capital, and information. So, will that be necessary? You ask all those the chip design and the software, all this the design engineering in the same geographical location? The answer is no. So when you talking about whether there will be Hsinchu software or the Dongguan software or which that, well, as a matter of fact, they are linked to each other by way of the internet. They can exchange their idea. This is the exact reason why there's a serious concern about the failure about trade agreement, across the strait trade agreement. Please allow me to remind you, without the trade agreement, cross the strait trade agreement, the service trade still exists. And the only things that left behind is that there's no government regulation. So, which the tax invasion for those people, especially who is the supporter for the Green Cap, the DPP, and Taiwan independence advocate. This is the reason why they need to use the sunflower trying to stop about the service trade agreement, because they will expose their commercial practice in mainland China. If you goes back to Nangang and also Qianzhen about those the software company and how many is the attorney actually live in Taiwan and fly to Shanghai or any major metropolitan city and practice as an attorney or a lawyer in mainland China, you are quite amazing. If you know about how many comic strips the designer, all those who the domestic, the interiors, the design, who actually practiced in Taiwan and were receiving the contract from mainland China. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the figures is amazing. So it is not necessary for you to live in Shanghai. Nowadays, you live in Shanghai is much more expensive if you compare living in Taipei. So this is reason why there's a lot of surgery, the medical doctor.